I was 78 years old when my granddaughter discovered the truth, but the lie began long before she was even born. For 20 years I let my entire family believe I was broke. Not struggling, not managing, not getting by. Broke, barely enough for utilities broke. I wore faded cardigans, used a flip phone, and drove a rusted blue sedan that coughed like a dying mule every winter morning. I lived in the same tiny bungalow I'd bought at 29, the one everyone assumed was paid off only because old people never move. No one ever suspected the truth because no one bothered to look deeper. My children, 3 of them, visited only when something was needed. A loan. A favor. My signature on a document they were too lazy to read. Or occasionally a meal when they wanted nostalgia. They came with hands out more often than hearts open. I learned quickly that when people believe you have nothing, they expect nothing from you, but they also give nothing. I stayed quiet. I stayed small. And I hid my truth behind a lifetime of habits. Thrift store clothes, homemade meals, a house kept neat but never updated, a life modest enough to be invisible. But the truth? I was wealthier than all of them combined. Not billionaire rich, not mansion and yacht rich. But decades of saving, careful investing, and a surprise inheritance from my late brother had turned into something substantial. Something life-changing. Something they would have devoured like starving wolves if they'd known. My lie wasn't meant to punish anyone. It was meant to protect what mattered most. My peace, my boundaries, and the last shreds of a relationship with my children that didn't revolve solely around money. But there was one person, one small bright presence, who never made me feel like a vault waiting to be cracked. My granddaughter, Elise. He came to me out of love, not convenience. She talked to me as if time slowed for us alone. She asked about my childhood, my recipes, my garden, my memories. Not once, did she ever ask what I could give her. She was the only one who saw me. And she was the one who would eventually uncover everything. But at the beginning, none of us knew how much one discovery would shift the entire family, or how the truth would test every bond we thought we understood. If I had known what was coming, I might have prepared myself. I might have braced for the storm. But storms rarely announce themselves gently. And Elise was about to open a door no one else had ever bothered to touch. Elise never arrived unannounced. That was the first sign something was different. Normally she sent a text, or if she was feeling playful, left a voicemail singing off-key and pretending to be a door-to-door salesperson. She'd show up with pastries she knew I liked or books she thought I'd enjoy, even though she was the only one in the family who remembered I still read every night before bed. But that morning the knock on my door came sudden, firm, almost urgent. 3 quick taps. Pause. Then 2 more. I wiped my hands on my apron, heart tightening the way it did when bad news disguised itself in everyday sounds. When I opened the door, there she was, wind-tousled hair, backpack slung over one shoulder, breath visible in the crisp air. "Grandma," she said. Not a greeting, a declaration. "Elise? Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Her eyes flicked past me into the house as though searching for something. Or perhaps making sure nothing had changed inside since her last visit. She stepped in without waiting for permission, which she knew she never needed, and closed the door behind her with a softness that troubled me more than if she'd slammed it. "I need to talk to you," she said. That sentence had never once preceded anything pleasant in my life. I motioned to the kitchen, where the kettle had just begun to hum. "Come sit. Let me make you tea. You look cold." She followed, but there was a heaviness to her steps. She dropped her backpack onto the floor with a soft thud and planted herself in the chair she'd claimed since she was 10, the one closest to the window where morning light made her hair look almost golden. I set 2 cups on the table, poured the tea, and watched the steam curl upward like secrets escaping. She didn't touch her cup. "Grandma, can I ask you something? And I need you to be honest." My throat tightened. "Of course. Always." She took a breath, bracing herself. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached into her backpack and pulled out a manila folder. My heart lurched. She slid it across the table. "What's this?" I asked, though a part of me already feared the answer. "Your house," she whispered. "Your everything." I stared at the folder as if it were a living thing. Dangerous, volatile, a spark aimed at the lie I'd spent 2 decades maintaining. "Elise, what did you find?" She swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I wasn't trying to pry. I promise. I would never invade your privacy." Her voice cracked. "But I saw something by accident." She opened the folder and turned it toward me. And there was a printout of the estimated property value of my home. A home worth far, far more than a broke old woman should ever possess. Not just a modest amount of equity. Not just some appreciation over the years. A fortune by any reasonable standard. Elise whispered, "Your house alone is worth nearly $2 million. Her voice sounded small, almost frightened. My hands curled around the edge of the table. She wasn't supposed to know. She wasn't supposed to ever know. I cleared my throat, forcing calm into my voice. Sweetheart, I didn't think you'd ever need to know that. But why hide it? She asked softly. Why let everyone think you're struggling? I've seen you hold off on buying new shoes because the old ones still have a little life in them. Grandma, you clip coupons. You reuse tea bags. He blinked rapidly, overwhelmed. Were you ashamed? Were you afraid? Or was it because of Mom and Uncle David and Aunt Lila? Because if they knew. She didn't need to finish. Because Elise was many things, bright, observant, tender-hearted, but she was not naive. She knew her parents. She knew her uncles. She had grown up watching the way entitlement shaped their requests and hardened their hearts. Elise, I whispered, sit with me. She came around the table, pulled a chair closer and took my hand the way she used to when she was a little girl afraid of thunderstorms. I didn't tell them, I said quietly, because they stopped asking how I was, and only asked what I could give. They treated me like a problem to manage. A burden. Or worse, an opportunity. Her face crumpled. I know. But you were the only one who came because you wanted to. Her eyes brimmed. I would come even if you had nothing. I know, I said. That's why you're the only one I couldn't lie to forever. She leaned forward, emotion shaking her voice. Grandma, does anyone else know? No, I said. No one. And how much? She hesitated, afraid to ask. Elise, I said gently, I'm comfortable. Much more comfortable than I've ever let on. She stayed silent, absorbing this, shoulders trembling with a mix of shock and something softer. Something like grief. Then very quietly she said, why didn't you trust me enough to tell me sooner? That question pierced deeper than any accusation my own children had ever thrown at me. I cupped her cheek with my hand. Sweetheart, it was never you I didn't trust. It was the world around you. And I didn't want you bearing the burden of a secret that could make your life harder. She dropped her forehead against my shoulder and I wrapped my arms around her, feeling how small she still was despite the years. For a long stretch of time we stayed like that. Then Elise lifted her head, wiped her face and said something that made my breath catch. I'm going to help you, Grandma. I'm going to protect you from them. Her voice didn't shake. She wasn't afraid. She was resolute. My sweet girl, the only one who'd never asked me for anything, was now offering me the one thing no amount of money could buy. Loyalty. But she had no idea how much she was about to uncover. Or how fast the rest of the family would come circling once even a hint of the truth slipped through the cracks. And I wasn't ready for any of it. Not the accusations. Not the confrontations. Not the ugliness I had spent years avoiding. Elise didn't just find my secret. She opened the door to a storm I had feared for 2 decades. For a few days after Elise discovered the truth, nothing happened. Life went on as if the universe were holding its breath. Elise came by more often, a quiet, watchful presence, helping me reorganize shelves, fixing loose hinges, replacing the light bulbs in the hallway I could no longer reach. We didn't speak about the money again. She didn't pressure, didn't pry. She stayed gentle, steady, exactly as she'd always been. But every time she glanced toward the front window, I knew she carried a fear neither of us dared voice. What if someone else found out? And she was right to worry. The first ripple came from my eldest daughter, Lila. Lila, who had perfected the art of dramatics long before she learned how to drive. Lila, who lived only 10 minutes away yet visited me less than the mailman. Lila, whose calls came conveniently around birthdays, tuition deadlines, and her never-ending emergencies. On a Thursday afternoon she phoned me, voice dripping with false concern. Mother, are you doing all right? I frowned. Of course. Why do you ask? Well, a pause, long and theatrical. Someone told me they saw you getting your roof inspected last week. My pulse thudded. Yes, I said evenly. The shingles were aging. And you could afford that? She asked too quickly. There it was, the first crack in my carefully crafted lie. I kept my voice calm. It was just an inspection, Lila. Nothing was fixed. Well, still, she said, sounding disappointed the conversation wasn't yielding what she wanted. I just worry about you. No, you worry about what you think I might have. We exchanged a few more pleasantries, shallow, brittle words, before she hung up. But the damage was done. Lila was suspicious. And Lila had the talent of spreading her suspicions the way a spark spreads through dry grass. 2 days later came a visit from my son, David. Unlike Lila, he didn't do theatrics. His approach was quieter, more calculated. He arrived with a paper bag of groceries, a gesture he hadn't made in years, wearing an expression that tugged uncomfortably between forced concern and genuine curiosity. He set the bag on the counter and looked around my kitchen with squinted eyes. You clean this place up? He asked. No, I said confused. Why? Looks different, fresher, less. He waved vaguely. Old. Because Elise had wiped the counters with that lemon oil she liked, and she had dusted the shelves, humming as she worked. Because her presence brought life into rooms that had grown accustomed to silent afternoons. I forced a smile. Just a bit of tidying. He leaned against the counter. Mom, be honest with me for a second. Those words again, be honest, as if honesty was a light switch I had kept off for sport. Of course, I said. You're not hiding anything, are you? Pause. A long one. I kept my breathing steady. What would I be hiding? He shrugged, but it was a calculated shrug. I don't know. Maybe money? A savings account? Something you haven't told us about. I swallowed slowly. Elise, who had been upstairs sorting books for me, froze on the landing. I could feel her listening without moving. I met my son's gaze. David, I have what I've always had. Enough to get by. He studied me for several seconds, weighing the answer, evaluating the lie behind the truth. Then he nodded, but something in his eyes told me he didn't believe a word. The real storm, however, began with a fight I never saw. Not in my house. In Elise's. She told me later, much later, that her mother had found the folder. Elise had hidden it in her backpack. He thought no one would look. But her mother, Lila's daughter, had been searching through her things looking for missing earrings. He saw the papers, the property reports, the estimated value, the financial notes printed from the county's website. She confronted Elise that night in the kitchen, voice rising so sharply it made the neighbor's dogs bark. Elise had tried to protect me. She denied knowing anything, claimed it was for a school project, insisted it was random research. But her mother wasn't a fool. By morning, half the family had heard whispers. Mom isn't broke. She's been lying. She has money she didn't tell us about. Why would she hide it from her own children? Whispers turned to questions. Questions turned to assumptions. Assumptions turned to accusations shaped in private group chats I wasn't part of. And suddenly, after years of barely remembering I existed unless they needed something, my phone began ringing. Relentlessly. Messages piling in. Calls from numbers I recognized and ones I didn't. A dozen variations of, "We need to talk. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Is it true? Don't you trust your family? You know we could have used help over the years." Mixed amidst them. Accusing ones. "So you lied to us? You let us worry about you for nothing? I guess you just enjoy playing the martyr. And worst of all, you trusted Elise over your own children?" That one sliced deeper than the others. Because it was both true and not true. I never trusted Elise because she was my granddaughter. I trusted her because she never saw me as an open wallet. She saw me as a person. The morning the barrage became unbearable, Elise came to my house, face pale, voice trembling with rage and guilt. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered as soon as she stepped inside. "I didn't mean for them to find out. I didn't tell them anything. I swear I tried to lie, but..." I put a hand over hers. "Sweetheart, this isn't your fault." "Yes, it is," she whispered. "I should have been more careful. I shouldn't have brought the papers home. Mom says you've been manipulating us all these years. Making us feel guilty so we'd help you. Her voice cracked. "She's calling you selfish." I closed my eyes. There was the one word children use to punish aging parents who won't give them what they want. Selfish. I exhaled slowly. "Elise, listen to me. I don't blame you, not for a second." Her chin shook. "They're going to come here, Grandma. All of them. They want answers." Of course they did. Answers meant leverage. Leverage meant guilt. Guilt meant pressure. Pressure meant money. I felt an old ache stirring. The ache of history repeating, patterns resurrecting, resentments sharpening. "They're angry," Elise whispered. "They feel betrayed." I stared at the window where afternoon light stretched across the floor in long, trembling lines. "Elise," I said quietly, "the truth is going to come out. It was inevitable." "But how do we handle it?" she asked, fear swallowing her voice. "We face it," I said. He squeezed my hand. "Together. Always." But neither of us knew just how ugly it was going to get. Because once a family smells money, or the possibility of it, their kindness, their civility, their sense of entitlement, all shift. And mine were already circling like hawks that had spotted movement in the grass. The confrontation was coming. And there was no stopping it now. They didn't give me a chance to prepare. No phone call. No warning. No polite inquiry wrapped in courtesy. They arrived in a cluster. 3 cars parking crookedly along my curb, doors slamming, voices rising before they even reached my porch. I stood by the front window, my hand clutching the curtain, watching them approach like a storm surge. My daughter Lila in her immaculate beige coat, my son David with his jaw clenched hard enough to crack, and my youngest Aaron marching behind them, phone in hand like he was gathering evidence. Elise stood next to me, her breath shallow. Grandma, do you want me to leave? No, my voice didn't shake. Stay. Because if I was going to face the children I raised, I wanted the one child who never used me to be there too. A sharp knock rattled the door. Then another louder. Then Lila's voice, sickeningly sweet and trembling with outrage. Mother, open this door now. I inhaled slowly, squared my shoulders and opened it. They pushed in immediately, brushing past me, filling my small living room with perfume, frustration, and the thick, unmistakable scent of entitlement. David was the first to speak. So, are you going to explain, he snapped, or should we tell you what we found? I stayed calm. Explain what? Lila scoffed. Oh, don't pretend. She threw her hands up dramatically. Nobody gets their house inspected for fun, Mother. Aaron crossed his arms. And your property value? We looked it up. He lifted his phone. We know about the 2 million. Don't act shocked. Elise stiffened beside me. I didn't look away from them. So you've all decided to spy on me now? You lied to us. Lila exploded. For 20 years. David barked. Manipulating us into thinking you were poor. Aaron added, stabbing his phone into the air as if it were a weapon. I almost laughed. Manipulating them? I had spent 20 years trying to live quietly enough to be left in peace. I looked at each of them slowly. You believed I was poor, I said softly, because you wanted to. They blinked, confused. You wanted to believe I needed you, I continued, to make yourselves feel generous when you offered crumbs. You wanted to believe I depended on you so you could complain about the burden of helping me. Lila's mouth dropped open. Oh no, you are not flipping this on us. Yeah, Aaron muttered. We're not the villains here. I felt Elise place a steadying hand on my back, grounding me. David stepped forward. Mom, listen. We should have known about your finances. We're your children. What if something happened to you? I raised an eyebrow. Something as in me dying? Or something as in you not knowing what you stand to inherit? Silence. A silence so thick it became an admission. Lila stuttered. Mother, how could you think so little of us? How could I? My voice sharpened, decades of quiet swallowed resentment cracking like a dam. You barely call unless you need something. You rarely visit unless something is wrong. When your father died, you disappeared for 3 months. Not one of you asked how I was coping. That's not fair, David started. And oh, I cut him off louder than I'd ever spoken to my children. You don't get to rewrite history. Not today. They froze. You assumed I was broke, I said, because it made it easier for you. You could feel superior. You could feel responsible. You could feel owed. Aaron scoffed. So what, you're some secret millionaire now? I shook my head. Not a millionaire. Just someone who saved, invested, and lived quietly. Elise spoke then, her voice small but firm. She wasn't hiding anything from you. She was protecting herself. 3 heads snapped toward her. Oh please, Lila sneered. Don't get involved, Elise. Elise is the only one who actually knows me, I interrupted. Lila's lips thinned. Of course you choose her. Of course. Aaron muttered. I always knew you loved her more. No, I said quietly. I loved you all. But I looked at Elise. She never asked me for anything. Not once. That silence hit different. Like a slap. And you think we only came for money? David asked bitterly. Did you come last Christmas without bringing up your mortgage? I asked. He flinched. And you, Lila, I continued. Tell me, when was the last time you visited without mentioning your credit card debt? Her face flushed an angry red. And Aaron, I said softly, almost sadly. When did you last sit with me without borrowing something? A signature? A tiny favor? Aaron's jaw clenched. That's what children do, Mom. They rely on their parents. Grown adults don't rely on their 78-year-old mother to fix their messes. Elise squeezed my hand. Lila suddenly turned her fire on her daughter. You knew. You knew for weeks and didn't tell us. Why? Elise swallowed. Because it wasn't my secret to share. That's not how families work. That's exactly how families work, Elise snapped back. You respect boundaries. You don't interrogate people. You don't track down their property records behind their backs. The room exploded into shouting. Lila yelling at Elise. David yelling at me. Aaron pacing, swearing under his breath, already calculating numbers in his head. The word inheritance slipped out of someone's mouth. Then will. Then entitled. All the things they had never said openly finally exposed under the harsh light of truth. And then, Then came the worst moment. The one that split the room into before and after. David turned to me, eyes blazing. Fine. You don't owe us your money. But you owe us honesty. He jabbed a finger in my direction. We have a right to know what you're worth. We're your children. Something inside me snapped. No, I said quietly. You have a right to kindness. To respect. To communication. But you do not have a right to my finances. You do not have a right to my privacy. And you do not have a right to assume that my life exists to support yours. They stunned into silence. I raised you, I whispered. I did my part. I gave you everything I could. But I am not your retirement plan. I am not your emergency fund. I am not your backup wallet. Elise's breath caught. Lila's voice broke. So what now? You're cutting us out. No, I said. But I'm setting boundaries. David scoffed. Boundaries? Now. Yes, I said, steady and calm. For the first time in my life. The room fell absolutely still. We will talk again, I said. But not today. Today you leave. All three of them stared at me, stunned that I would dare eject them from my own home. But I held their gaze. And slowly, angrily, they backed toward the door. First Aaron. Then David. Then Lila, who paused long enough to spit out. You'll regret this, Mother. I didn't flinch. I regret not doing it sooner. She left, slamming the door so hard the frame shook. The house went silent. Only then did my knees weaken. Only then did Elise pull me into her arms. Only then did I allow myself to feel the truth. Not one of them was angry because I had lied. They were angry because they believed I had something that wasn't theirs. And this was only the beginning. When the door slammed behind them, the house didn't just go quiet. It collapsed into silence. A silence so thick, so sudden, it felt like the air itself had taken a step back. I lowered myself into my armchair, the one with fading floral cushions and a small tear Elise once offered to sew. My hands trembled not from fear but from a weight lifting. A weight I didn't realize had grown so heavy over the years, like vines wrapping around the ribs. Elise knelt in front of me, eyes soft. Grandma, are you all right? I nodded, though tears stung my eyes. Not from sadness, but from the strange, painful freedom of finally saying the things I'd bitten back for years. I'm all right, I whispered. I never wanted it to come to this. She rested her chin on my knee like she used to when she was 5 and wanted reassurance. You didn't do anything wrong. I knew that. But knowing something doesn't soften the ache of having your own children look at you like a disappointed banker instead of a mother. We sat in that silence for a long while, until Elise finally said what had been pressing against her lips. They're not going to just let this go. Well, they wouldn't. I knew my children. I had raised their stubbornness, their pride, their inability to sit with discomfort. They would stew and seethe and spiral, convincing themselves that I was the one who wronged them. But I didn't expect what came next. The silence lasted 3 days. 3 long days where none of them called. Not out of concern. Not out of guilt. But because they were strategizing. On the morning of the 4th day, I found a letter in my mailbox. From David. A printed letter, formal, stiff, rehearsed. Mother, we need to sit down together as a family with full transparency. It's clear you've hidden things from us for years. This affects us all. We expect an explanation. Expect, he wrote. Not request, not hope, not wish. Expect. As if I were an employee failing to comply. I folded the letter and set it aside, feeling a hollow ache bloom inside my chest. Later that afternoon, a message from Aaron appeared on my phone. We need to talk about your estate. This isn't something you can handle alone. We should be involved. Estate. Not well-being. Not health. Not emotions. Always numbers. Always pages. Always what they could claim ownership over. Then Lila's voice note arrived, her tone expertly mixing guilt, accusation, and wounded pride. Mother, I just don't understand why you'd humiliate us like that. You made us feel stupid. You made us feel used. You owe us an honest explanation. It's the least you can do after all these years we've supported you. Supported me. Supported me. Supported me. As if the emotional support I gave them their entire lives counted for nothing. As if time spent raising them was suddenly erased by a bank balance they'd never known existed. I deleted none of the messages. I saved everyone. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. Because for the first time in years I saw the truth laid bare. They didn't love me less because they thought I had nothing. They loved me less because I refused to give them everything. But Elise was different. Those 3 days she came every morning, letting herself in with the spare key. She'd make me tea, fold my blankets, bring fresh bread from the bakery she liked. She never brought up the money. He brought up me. How's your back today? Did you sleep all right? I put new flowers outside. Purple ones. You always said purple is calming. She filled my hollow house with warmth the others couldn't fake even on their best days. On the third afternoon she found me staring out the window, watching a single leaf spiral down the driveway. She came beside me. Talk to me. I hesitated. I'm just thinking about what happens next. What do you want to happen next? She asked gently. No one had asked me that in a very long time. I want peace, I whispered. She nodded. And you deserve it. Then after a long pause. Grandma, there's something else you should know. My stomach tightened. What is it? She bit her lip, hesitating. Her eyes softened with a mixture of guilt and protectiveness. The day Mom found the papers, she didn't stop with them. My breath caught. What do you mean? She started searching everything, Elise said quietly. She dug deeper. She looked up your taxes, your insurance records. She even tried contacting the county office. I felt the room tilt slightly. She told my uncles. And she told my cousins. And now everyone is talking. My heart sank. How many people know? Everyone, she whispered. Everyone in the family. I leaned against the window frame. 20 years of silence and protection, gone in a matter of hours. Elise grabbed my hands. Grandma, listen to me. I'm going to help you through this. I won't let them bully you. I promise. I believed her. But promises couldn't stop the storm that was now growing. A storm fed by whispers, inflated by assumptions, fueled by entitlement. What are they saying? I asked softly. Elise closed her eyes. That you lied. That you manipulated them. That you owe them explanations. That you owe them money. Of course. Of course it would come to this. But then she continued, hesitating. And some of them are saying something worse. What? That I'm the reason you're turning against the family. That you're choosing me. Playing favorites. Plotting with me against them. A slow chill spread through my chest. Elise. He finally met my gaze. Her eyes were glassy but determined. They think you're going to leave everything to me. The words shook me. Not because they were wrong. Not because they were right. But because they revealed the truth. Money had not corrupted my children. The idea of being denied money had. And the idea that Elise, a girl who never once asked me for more than a cup of tea, might be valued over them? That was enough to ignite war. Elise, I whispered, I never meant for you to get caught in this. She took my hand firmly. I'm not afraid. But I was. Because I suddenly understood something. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about loyalty, control, power, resentment. Old wounds resurfacing. New alliances being drawn. The family was splitting. Lines were forming. And none of them were subtle. But the twist, the real, unexpected twist, came quietly from a corner I didn't expect. One of my children wasn't angry. One of them wasn't plotting. One of them wasn't preparing for war. One of them was worried. Truly, genuinely worried. And they were about to do something that would shift the entire story. Something I never saw coming. Something that would force me to confront the truth I'd avoided for far too long. Money didn't change who people were. It only revealed what had been hiding all along. The house felt unusually quiet that night. Not peaceful, not comforting. Quiet in the way a room feels after someone has shouted into it and left. A kind of trembling silence, the kind that settles in your bones and makes you feel older than your mirror ever could. After Elise confronted my children with the truth, they stormed out of my house like offended royalty. 3 adult children, marching to their cars as if I had betrayed them. Not one stayed behind to ask how I felt. Not one bothered to check if their words had shaken me. They cared only that the river of imagined inheritance had dried up before they could dip their hands in. When the door slammed shut for the final time, Elise turned to me. She didn't rush to speak. She didn't fill the air with noise the way people do when they're scared. She simply came closer, as if she were approaching an injured animal that might either lean against her or bite in confusion. Grandma, she whispered, are you okay? The question broke something gentle inside me. For 20 years no one had asked me that. Not truly. Not with tenderness behind the words. I sank onto the living room sofa, the old one I'd kept for decades because I never felt the need to replace it. Elise sat beside me, her small hand finding mine like it belonged there. And I told her everything. Not just the money. Not just the investments, the inheritance, the slow growth of my accounts. I told her about the loneliness, the quiet birthdays, the Christmases where I wrapped presents for others but received nothing more than an obligatory text. I told her how my children had once loved me fiercely, when they were small, needy, sweet. How life hardened them. How entitlement spoiled them. How their spouses fueled a culture of taking, not giving. And finally, how I had chosen peace over performance. How pretending to be broke became easier than saying no. By the time I finished, my voice was shaking. Elise's eyes glistened but she didn't look away. Grandma, you did all that alone, she whispered, horrified. I tried to smile. I've been alone longer than any of you realized. She leaned her forehead against mine, a gesture so intimate, so sincere, it undid the last of my composure. Not anymore, she said fiercely. Not anymore, I promise. We sat in silence after that, not an empty silence but a full one. The kind that wraps around two people like a blanket. Then Elise asked the question I had been dreading, the one no one else had earned the right to ask. What do you want to do now? Not, what do we get? What did you leave us in your will? What does this mean for us? But you, what do you want? No one had asked me that in decades. I looked around my house. The outdated floors. The peeling paint. The hand-sewn curtains. Every corner told a story of a woman who had minimized herself so others wouldn't prey on her abundance. I exhaled. My voice cracked. For the first time in years I think I want a life that fits me. Not the small version everyone assumed I should have. Elise smiled through her tears. A smile full of relief, pride, and something protective. Then we're going to make that happen, Grandma. The certainty in her voice startled me. We. She nodded. I'm not letting you do life alone anymore. You've carried everyone else for decades. Let me carry you a little. A single tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't bother wiping it. For the rest of the night she stayed. We talked until the moon dipped low behind the rooftops. We laughed. Unexpectedly, quietly, like two conspirators beginning a softer revolution. And several times when the memories grew heavy, she simply rested her head on my shoulder. It had been so long since someone had rested on me without wanting anything in return. When she finally went to bed in the guest room, I walked slowly through the house, touching the walls, the furniture, the relics of my long performance of poverty. Everything looked different now. Not because the objects had changed, but because I had. Because for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't alone in the truth. And for the first time in 20 years, there was someone who didn't want my money. Only me. The lie I lived to protect my heart had finally led me to the one person who had never tried to break it. And I knew, as surely as I knew my own name, that nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The morning after everything unraveled felt strangely bright. Sunlight poured into the kitchen in a way I hadn't seen in years. Maybe because I'd always been too tired, too guarded, too small to notice. But that morning the light felt like a visitor, warm and unapologetic. Elise was already awake, sitting at the old wooden table with a mug of tea and my dusty recipe notebook open in front of her. She looked up with a sleepy smile. Morning, Grandma. It hit me, how natural it felt to have her there. How the house, usually so hollow, felt lived in. She had stayed not because she felt obligated but because she cared. You didn't have to wake so early, I said. I wanted to, she replied. Besides, we have a life to plan. I laughed. An unfamiliar sound, brittle from disuse but genuine. A life to plan? For me. For us, she corrected softly. I sat beside her and for the first time I allowed myself to imagine something different. A home with color. A garden I tended because I enjoyed it, not because it saved money. Clothes that fit comfortably and beautifully. Trips I never took. Dreams I shelved so I wouldn't attract attention. It all felt too big to reach for. Elise. I don't even know where to start. She closed my recipe book gently, then took my hands. Start with something small. One thing you've always wanted but never let yourself have. One thing. My mind drifted, not to yachts or jewels or grand renovations, but to something simple, almost childlike. I want a kitchen with yellow walls, I admitted. A tiny dream, but it burned bright inside me. I've always wanted that. Something warm. Something cheerful. He grinned. Then we're painting the kitchen yellow. Just like that. As if joy didn't need permission. As if I could simply choose happiness. As if I was allowed to live again. My kitchen walls are yellow now. Sunflower bright, warm, alive. Elise helped paint every inch. My garden is blooming again. My laughter is louder. My house feels full. And for the first time in decades, my heart feels unclenched. As if I've stepped out of a shadow that was never meant to be my home. I pretended to be broke for 20 years to protect myself. But it turns out I didn't need protection. I needed her. The granddaughter who saw me. Chose me. Loved me without expecting a transaction in return. Everything changed the moment she learned the truth. But the biggest change was finally learning I deserved a life worth living. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that real family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up with love, not expectations.